of Carbon Experts Live. My name is Abigail Mella. I'll be your host today. I'm very excited to be joined by Michael Prüser, the CTO of ENVImet, which is the world's leading microclimate simulation software. And he will be in conversation with Panu Pasanen, the CEO and founder of One Click LCA, the leading end-to-end sustainability platform for construction and manufacturing. Today, we are going to discuss climate resilience and tackling heat stress in urban areas. Today's episode is of particular importance to urban planners, developers, and architects. So if you have not yet heard, One Click LCA is now the strategic global reseller of ENVImet. So it's very exciting. And the aim here is to help more businesses and organizations deliver livable, heat-resistant, and also climate-resilient projects and cities. And in today's talk, Michael and Panu will discuss what this means for all of you who are listening in. As a quick note, today's Carbon Experts Live episode is brought to you by One Click LCA. One Click LCA is the global end-to-end sustainability platform for construction projects and products, with the mission to power the makers of a zero carbon future. And you can learn more at oneclicklca.com. So first up, I'm very excited to introduce Michael Prüser, the CTO of ENVImet. ENVImet is a pioneer in holistic 3D microclimate simulation software, and it's based on more than 20 years of research. ENVImet's microclimate model evaluates the long-term impacts of environmental factors and spans various scientific disciplines, resulting in a comprehensive model that accurately reflects real-world interactions. Michael, such a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, Abigail. So I'm very excited to be on your Carbon Expert live talk today, especially as it's going to be hotter outside, even in the central parts of Europe. So I'm really looking forward to give you a little bit of insight of what we do at ENVImet, and especially where are the joint features together with One Click LCA, and to dive a little bit into that topic of climate modeling, which is not really an easy topic, but it's really fascinating and is really important when we work for sustainable environmental design and we want to make a greener environment for us and our children as well. Looking forward to this talk.
It's great to have you here. And next up, I'm very excited to introduce to you all Panu Pasanen, CEO and founder of One Click LCA. One Click LCA, as I've mentioned, is the world's leading end-to-end sustainability platform for construction and manufacturing. It was founded in 2001. Panu has extensive experience in life cycle assessment, embodied carbon, and sustainability, and he collaborates with governments and corporations to advance regulations and policies for effective decarbonization. And he is personally driven to create user-friendly, automated, and robust LCA or life cycle assessment software toward this mission. Panu, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Great. I would like all of you to, in the audience, note that we are having a live question and answer segment at the end of today's show. So you can already start dropping your questions for Michael and Panu in the comments section now. And I would love to kick things off by turning to you, Michael, and asking you in brief to provide a short introduction to you and your work at ENVImet as CTO, and let us get to know you a bit better.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we're working on microclimate. So it is actually the climate in the environment we're living in. So in urban area, in landscape, a park, a theme park, wherever you are surrounded by an environment which is partly different to what you expect as an average regional climate. It's influenced by wind, by sun, by all the different elements just around you. And 30 years ago, we were fascinated really by this interaction that come into place in such an holistic environment. And we were asking ourselves, with growing computer technologies and growing options, new interfaces, new computing resources, will it be possible to simulate these interaction effects in a computer, to build a second world where we can modify things? So as I when I was 20, fascinated by computer games. So this kind of gamification to change something, to see the effects of this change on the climate, on the people living in that climate. That was the great idea at the beginning, what we thought ENVImet would be a nice idea, to be something in between the very scientific tools, which has been existing since the 80s, and something between this and a computer game where you can drop and drag things and experience what's happening. So this was our mission, to build a computer software which is in the middle of the both. It's part of a game, it's part of scientific communities, and to make it open to everyone so that you don't need to have an expert knowledge, you don't have to have a supercomputer in your cellar to make this working, so that everyone has the possibility to understand these complex interactions and to decide, when I move a tree from here to there or chop it down, what will be the impact. So this is where we're working at ENVImet. On one hand, of course, using the latest technologies from scientific research. On the other hand, bringing that to the people on the computer, make it feasible, make it tangible, and make it usable for a normal person to understand and to use it. So that's what we are working on, this transition field between science and, call it games, but it's not really a game. It's just on the level of easy understanding. What am I doing? What are the implications of what I am doing? That's why we are working at ENVImet now, together with One Click LCA as our strategic partner.
Brilliant. Thank you, Michael. And Panu, now over to you. Maybe give our audience a bit of background about who you are and your work as CEO at One Click LCA.
Yeah, sure. So, my name is Panu Pasanen, CEO and founder of One Click LCA, and One Click LCA stands for powering the makers of a zero carbon future. So we have been helping businesses in the construction and manufacturing industry to decarbonize their work, their projects, the districts, all of that for 20 years now, really. And in all of that time, of course, the understanding on decarbonization and circularity and these things, it has progressed. But at the same time, unfortunately, we've come to the point where climate change is not an if question, it's how much question. And this means that resilience is critical. So even if you have a very low carbon project, you actually have to be sure that what you're going to be building is going to be livable, it's going to be usable, people will want to come there, people will enjoy being there, and you're not taking inordinate risks with anything like overheating of either of people, of spaces or assets. And that, of course, requires a completely different approach. And that's why we are partnering with ENVImet, and very happy to have this conversation with Michael.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Panu. To kick things off, for those of you in the audience today that are watching as well as listening, I thought it would help to provide a bit of an anchor for our conversation if Michael could actually present a couple of slides to give an overview of ENVImet, which is very visual somehow. So I would love to turn things over to you, Michael, to tell our audience about ENVImet at a more kind of tangible and practical level.
Yeah, thank you very much. So actually we have picked two slides or two situations. The one is the one we're looking at right now. So this is an urban setting, and obviously hot urban setting. And we have put in a number of boxes so to indicate some of the interactions of the meteorological, physical, biological interactions that have to be considered when we are looking for to understand the microclimate, because in the end, the microclimate may be just temperature, or maybe just wind, or maybe just humidity, but it's a consequence of multiple processes based on physical properties of the surroundings, based on biological functions, especially when we talk about vegetations. You see on the right-hand side, shading with trees, evaporation from trees. So this is not just a fabric. This is not just something we have placed and expected to work, but this is something which is a living organism. So we have to take care of trees and vegetation. So everything comes together in our model. So this is why we call it a holistic model, even Many things are called holistic in these days, but especially here it's really true because there are a lot of fields of science and different areas of research come together. So we could place even more boxes inside this figure, but you won't see anything of the figure. So just imagine yourself standing at this subway entrance and looking around in an urban environment. You will discover there are really a lot of things that are very different, and they have to be considered in microclimate modeling. For example, you have to understand the facades, which are complex because they are 3D. They are having complex structures in itself. And in addition, the facades depends on different materials, isolation, artificial materials, greening facades, glass, stone, or whatever you think of, whatever architects think facades look like. You have all the different types of surfaces that need to be considered because they store heat during the day, thinking of a dark asphalt road, which gets very hot during the day, but it also keeps the energy stored in the underground 2 meter level, and then releases it during the day so you can walk during the night over the asphalt road and it's still warming up. So when we think about modeling all these aspects, and we do this modeling because we want to know, get insight, what's going on in my environment, what's going on in my urban area, we all need to consider these things like dynamic shading, because urban climate is not a stationary thing. It's changing through the day. The urban microclimate at 10 in the morning is completely different to the urban microclimate in the afternoon. It's not steady state because the afternoon situation depends on what has been happening during the noon, what has happening during the early morning hours. So we have to look for the shading. We have to look, where does the shade being cast to? How much shade is it? When we talk about artificial materials, we have very complex situations of reflectances. So what do we see as facades? Where does the solar radiation being reflected? Which surfaces does it hit? Which surfaces does it not hit? So this urban heat stress, this is one of the outcomes besides other things like air pollution. So we're talking about heat stress today. This is a function of everything you see here. And it's a function of everything you see when you look around yourself in an urban setting and wondering, wow, this is really complex. And moving on, when we see the same aspect more in the landscaping environment, is it an urban park, or it could be a backyard of a big premises or a zoo or whatever, it's still maybe not as many artificial materials involved there, but on the other hand, we do have a lot of natural elements involved there. So in ENVImet, we also do have a lot of functions that come from biology to understand, when does a tree evaporate? When does it stop to evaporate? Because trees want to survive, so they do not evaporate all the time because they will get loss of water. And looking at grass, it's even quicker. So if you walk around after a long summer, you see the grass is no longer green, it's going to be yellow or other colors, it's not functioning. Or other elements that are involved with landscaping designs. And when we talk about landscaping and nature-based solutions, you know that landscaping ideas are moving into architecture of urban areas. So talking about facade greening, rooftop gardens, sponge cities, and so on. We use a lot of elements coming from landscaping now in urban design, like water reservoirs, cooling from water. Does it work? How much does it cool? How big should the water be? And just like as Panu said, it's not a question if it's nice to have. We do need to have that because cities are overheating, and we do need parks. We do need cool spots. And we also have to have it optimized in a way to say, oh, how many trees is the best solution, because trees are costly. Trees need to be maintained. And this is all included in ENVImet, not of course everything, but most of the feedback processes of evaporation, of shadow casting, of surface areas, heating up, cooling down, and last but not least, we will talk about it later on, of people moving in that environment, because the environment is not standing for itself, but it's done made for people, and also for animals, of course, but mainly now we talk about people living in these areas. So, and when we move on to a real case world study, so this is something which looks not as nice as the rendering before, but is a real world study we have done for CTO. This is an extension of the University of Paris, where they did have an extension plan to make new buildings on the campus. So that's what you see on the left-hand side. So the original plan, and on the smaller building that's labeled with planning, these are the new facilities planned for the Paris University. And below, we did a study with ENVImet, and you see, just look at the colors. So obviously, the bright colors, the red colors, the orange colors, these indicate areas where heat stress occurs. It's not only heat stress due to the new buildings. There has been heat stress before as well. So it's not just newly built heat stress, but it's also existing heat stress. But the question was, can we change something? So we do want to have that building. There's no question we need these buildings. But what can we do with not big changes? We're not talking about not building these buildings. So it's not a policy of avoidance. It's a policy of optimization that we provide with ENVImet. So we do really minimal changes for just adding some trees, adding some water, also look a bit of, can we change or improve the ventilation? And when you just look at the figure at the very bottom of the right-hand side, you see what we have really achieved with just little modifications to the original design. And we could be able to cool down this campus of CTO by 2 degrees centigrade air temperature. That doesn't sound that much, but 2 degrees air temperature is really a lot. That's above what we are trying to avoid right now with the Paris Agreement to stagger up. And it's also the level that normally urban areas are hotter than the environment. So there's really a lot of effect. And it's, if you also add the effect of shades, so that would be an even stronger impact on the people living or working or studying on the CTO. So that's a practical example on how we work, how the ENVImet model's output looked like. Of course, they are not as nice as the renderings, but it's the nature of scientific outputs. But they really produced high-resolution results to assess the impacts of the changes we are thinking about. And we have, as it is only in the computer all the time in the world, to optimize it, to move trees, to change this and to change that before we start building it. Okay, so moving on.
Thank you so much.
It was the last slide.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I can only imagine that for people using the software, it must feel quite incredible to manipulate an environment and to see the immediate sort of cooling impact of changing airflow or adding vegetation, and it's somehow very felt and kind of experienced by the user. So yeah, it's quite exciting. So to kick off our conversation, it's summer, yeah, and it's hot. And I think we've all been reading the same headlines in the past couple of weeks. Research studies also indicate the same, that extreme heat is becoming more violent and extreme heat is becoming more frequent. So the first question I would like to pose to you, Panu and Michael, is what does heat mean for humans in urban areas experiencing that heat? And maybe, Panu, I could pass to you first and give you an opportunity to share your voice.
Yeah, sure. So first, if we just look at it purely commercially, so if these people are consumers or people who work for you, they will try to avoid the extreme heat. So they may actually not, walk outside. They may, use air-conditioned cars or other things to move about, which of course means that the cities are not alive anymore in that sense. So people will avoid it to the extent they can. And then what it means for the people, I mean, personally, I have 2 cats, right? But I feel like a cat when it's too hot. I don't want to do anything. And obviously, being in Finland, that doesn't luckily happen too often, so we manage to get by. But, productivity drops. So according to the founder of Singapore, the whole productivity of Asia has been made possible by air conditioning, right? And that kind of effects, they are very drastic. So just the human capabilities get reduced until to the point where you actually are not able to do anything, and then it becomes more a health question, or with Michael is the better person to answer.
Yeah, definitely. To just Panu focused on the outside, you also have to think about the inside, because we are living in buildings, and buildings are a part of this system. So it's just not the outside environment that heats up, it's also the buildings which are inside this environment. So, and if we say we do not want air conditioning in every flat, which is of course nothing which will be sustainable in any case, we have to consider the fact that also the indoor environment is heating up. And we know from research that if you are having air temperatures in your sleeping room above 80 degrees centigrade, you're not sleeping well. And if this period lasts over 5 days, your productivity during the day will be completely demolished. So it's not even just about not walking outside for fun. It's about your productivity and your work, even if your office space is cooled down then. But if you haven't slept during the night or haven't been able to catch a healthy sleep for several days, you won't be able to do anything sensible in your office. And so it's not really just for leisure. It's a crucial question of productivity for the whole community.
And then what if we talk about the, actual life and death matters? So, in Greece, these people get lost without water bottles, and then, sad things happen. But so in cities, we actually also have just like apartments that get overheated, often elderly people or other who are like afflicted, who actually are not able to survive the heat stress. And for younger people, at least in Southern Europe, still it's manageable largely. But what about the actual like critical risks the heat waves mean for us, Michael? How do you see it?
Yeah, we definitely have to look at the vulnerable parts of our community, and not about the people who have the choice or the freedom to move to other locations, to choose the day of time they want to live. But we have to think about the younger ones, so thinking about schools and kids, but also about the elderly ones. So our communities are going elderly, and as you get older, your heat adaptation processes in your body are beginning to work less efficiently. In addition, people always tend to not drink enough, and they're also not as mobile as the other people. So if we want to have all the people living in an urban area involved in urban life, in our daily social life, it is crucial that they can participate in the outdoor life without getting the risk of getting health damages, or the risk of dehydrating, or the risk of overheating. That's really, really crucial. And in Canada or other countries, they have cooling down houses. But still, if you do have cooling down houses, you still have to go there. You have to have the chance to go there. It's not just around the corner. I think there's a lot of things that we can do, and we can also analyze with ENVIMet, which was, for example, in Australia. They are plotting out walkable paths through Brisbane, through Melbourne, to say, people, you want to go from spot A to spot B, this would be the best path to go. And this would be the path in the shade, in the windy corridors. And this is definitely most of the time not the shortest path, but it's the best path for you.
So we're kind of focusing on urban areas right now. And I wanted to ask if you, maybe Michael, you can kick off by answering the question, what are cities already doing to tackle urban heat? And what should cities be doing to tackle urban heat?
Yeah, that's a good thing, because I guess now in the year 2024, most of the cities have realized that there is a problem going on, and it's going to be pushed every summer season. But luckily, it's not forgotten during the winter. So city planning and city infrastructure is a long-term process which lasts over 20, 30 years, because things have to be constructed, they have to be planned. And there is also a lot of conflicts in different usage of areas. And cities are the ones who have the capacity and the policy to control these development plans. They have the ability to organize patches of green corridors. They have the legislative power to say, if you build a flat roof, you have to put greening on top of it. So all these things are very easy to do, because I think if you wait that people are doing it from their own motivation, you have to wait a very long time. Of course, there are always some early adapters, but cities are the ones who organize their way on how the city is going to evolve over the next 20, 30, 50 years. So what's your experience, Panu?
So long time ago, when I was living in Hungary, the Budapest government decided they will plant 10,000 trees. It sounded like a lot, and you can see that in the cityscape, right? I mean, so it makes a difference. Of course, they will be saplings at that time, and they will be probably quite large by now. But just to give an order of magnitude of change, Budapest is like, if you consider Paris intramuros, like the core Paris, it's about the same population. So 2 years ago, Paris said they will plant 170,000 trees. That's how bad it is. And 170,000 trees doesn't come, for free. And there's the allocation problem and making sure it's efficient. And that's something, of course, simulation can help you to do. But it's going to require a lot of measures. But the key thing to take away, I think, for cities is to incorporate it into the core process so you don't have to fix it after. And all of these planting 10,000 trees, 170,000 trees, that's fixing it after. Whereas what would be the way to go in business of ordinary course would be to say, like Vienna does in Austria, would be to say, if you want to get a building permit, you need to show that you're not generating net extra heat with your project. So you're not creating sort of reflectancy, which will, heat up neighboring buildings. You're not going to generate this kind of things, and there's going to be still airflow. And how you deal with that is, your design prerogative, but making sure that you embed these things into the core processes of zoning and core processes of construction permitting. I would say that's kind of the most important thing. It doesn't mean that you still don't have to fix the cities, because most cities have so much existing building stock that they need to be improving the things that are already in place. But I would say the core processes are the ones that need to drive it. You cannot only have what you call, it sounds nice to plant 170,000 trees, and it's nice, right? But that's not enough. You need to make sure your core processes are addressing the issue at heart.
Yes, exactly. And that you don't forget that trees are living organisms. So you have to really underline that with the red color, because many cities just at the moment allocate money for the initial buying of the trees, and then they just put it and forget about it. And then they come back in 4 years and say, oh, this tree is dead, obviously. So yes, because they did not look after it. And so it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of money to get it working. So plant half of the trees, but do that in the right way.
Yeah, and like very simple, like when you plant the trees, of course, they need soil. I mean, because the soil is what stores water, asphalt doesn't. So like that kind of things, they have to be put in the structural planning mechanism, how you approach the whole thing. But there are a couple of things which go in a good direction. So like in Paris and in France in general, they have now this zero net artificialization regulation, not enforced really, like, so we can't say it actually sticks, but that regulation in itself just reduces the amount of paving over. So you don't pave over everything anymore automatically as a reflex, because you have a risk of not getting a permit. We have something similar for stormwater purposes here in Finland, but it also works for heat.
And in this conversation, if we transition from what cities can do or what they should be doing, and now turn our sights to developers and designers. So very specifically, what can developers and designers do to tackle urban heat? And maybe I would pass this to Panu to kick off the discussion.
So if we look at the developer has more power because they can choose what site they build on and which one not. So some sites are actually just pretty hard to deal with. But if we assume we have a given site, for a developer's purposes, I would definitely start to look at how do you position the building mass and how do you position the other things if you have any flexibility. Usually there's some flexibility. And how does this whole interact? So what does it mean for shading the neighboring buildings? What does it mean for not just for microclimate, but for other parameters? And then I would just look at who's the designer we are appointing on this and ask them to deal with this optimization so we get the best possible outcome, because obviously fixing anything later costs way more, but putting them right in the initial design doesn't cost anything. And every square meter you don't pave over doesn't cost you anything, like simple as that.
Yeah, definitely. And so there's really a long list of things that can happen if we do bad design. So this can start with very obvious things like generating wind jets, which really make harm to the infrastructure you have or make it simply unusable. So in the city where I'm living in Essen, we do have a main entrance of the city hall, which have never been used over 10, 20 years because the wind flow was directly directed towards the door opening. So it was practically impossible to open the door. But if you manage to open the door, you get all the wind into the city hall. So these are the very obvious things, but also it's about the little things that you want your design to work. So you think about an outdoor space, a restaurant maybe, or a leisure place where if it's an office building where your employees are sitting outside during the lunch break or so, you want that to work because you do have this space, but you see a lot of examples where this space is just empty and it's a lost space because it's not used, it's too hot, too shady, too windy or whatever. And designers are really in this position because most of the time it really doesn't change the functionality of the building, especially not if you think about it in the very first phase of a project. So can we move this entrance to the left or to the right? Impossible to change that in the later phase. But in the beginning, when we just talk about cubatures or where does the building supposed to stand at all, there are so many things you can easily influence if you think about in the very first design stage. And also this gives you a head start. So if it's a competition and you say, okay, there are several other architects who also want to build this building, this landmark building, for example, and you do have a design, and you're also able to show based on numerical methods that this design works. It's not just that you think that your design works, you can prove it on an objective base because you cannot cheat the computer. So then you can say, okay, look at this, my design works. And if the others have not thought about it so far or have just drawn funny arrows, so this is really a head start for you as an architect or a designer or a developer to say, I cannot just make neat buildings, but they also work on a sustainable basis.
So in other words, win more business, which is pretty good. So yeah, that's actually, sorry to hear about the Essen City Hall. So we have also where our office is just next to here, like we have a massive 1.5 kilometer wind tunnel where it's just accelerating. And you actually have to lean into the wind sometimes when you cross a street, like it's so crazy. But these kind of things, they cannot be fixed anymore because now we have the street and the buildings are a funnel. So now we have this forever, There, obviously, individual architect designing an individual building cannot fix the whole district anymore. But if I just look at what are the couple of things that I would look at as an architect first, so I would look at the paved over area, number one thing, simple. Second, I would look at the wind tunnel effects. Third, I would look at the reflectancy and thermal storage, just to get a couple of rules of thumb, what to consider. But I would also consider whether simulation can help you deliver something more in terms of winning more business and deliver more value for your customer. That's roughly the order how I would approach this as a designer.
Yeah, no, I think we all talk about digital twins, and these digital twins are not just cartographic funny things, but they are also supposed to provide a working data infrastructure with a topology. And it's really easy in these days to include all the simulations or the LCA aspects because you have all the data organized at hand. It's not like 15 years ago where you lose weeks or months collecting the data from different municipalities with different formats where you said, oh, I don't want to do this just because that I would like to do it, but it's impossible. But nowadays, everything is standardized. You can get a lot of web interfaces. So most of the time you don't even need to move out of your office to get all the data together. Then it's just a click of a button and you can leave the computer and enjoy your hopefully thermally adequate outdoor environment while the computer does all the work. So it's very easy now to do that. And I think there is no excuse for not doing that.
Except if you want the competitors to deal with these problems.
I think speaking of competition is a great way to segue into our final question of today's talk, which is, what is the business value of building for resilience and adaptation? And I know Michael and Pana, you've both touched on this a bit about, winning more projects by differentiating. But yeah, let's dive into that, and maybe Pana, you can take this first.
So typically, if you are, let's say, real estate landlord and you're renting spaces like restaurants or shops or other, often you're actually renting them on a minimum plus percentage of turnover basis. So that means that if you actually have a property where you have a nice terraced cafe and nice terraced restaurant, you will probably find some tenants because they are in a shopping center or similar. But if it so happens that it's unbearably hot or unbearably windy or similar problems, you're not just going to have foot traffic. And that means that you're not going to get good rents because your index of rent is turnover based. So it's actually just going to reduce your income. And when you reduce your income, a couple of things happen. Your margins go down. Your mortgage rates go up because you have less actually profit on the asset, and your asset value goes down because it doesn't generate as much rent. So you're just dead. And that's only the direct immediate impact on revenue. Of course, not all the businesses have part of the business outdoors, but like that's the number one thing. If you have anything to do with anything happening outside, even if you have a couple of chairs outside which belong to a business, you need to think about that business that you're actually losing there.
Yeah, let me dive into that because at the moment, not starting with Corona, but being accelerated by Corona, we do have a lot of shifts in the way people are using the urban environment. So the amount of, we call it unpurposeful pedestrians increase. So that means these are people who are walking around, but they do not have the plan. I go to shop A, shop B, shop C because I don't need to, because it's delivered by Amazon anyway. So they are strolling around and they are controlled by subtental effects like microclimate, visual impression, and so on. And then, of course, they do see your shopping facility, your bookstore, your bakery, whatever you have. So even if you do not have an outdoor facility or outdoor cities, but you're gaining frequency, you're getting bypasses that are attracted to your shop window. And these shop facilities which are left over as a present shop facilities, they really depend on bypasses. And these bypasses are no longer just going from bus stop A to bus stop B, but they are having more time, they're spending more time on the outdoor environment. And this outdoor environment results in an avoidance of your area where your shop is. Then you definitely will have a commercial problem, even if you have the best shop in the world. So if people are not strolling by, or you have a good to offer where are other opportunities somewhere else, you will be on the losing edge. So, and this is a human perspective of the whole thing.
Yeah, maybe just to add 2 more points of view on this. So if you haven't managed the climate resiliency of your assets, the outdoor temperature of the buildings will be higher, and consequently, either you will have higher indoor temperatures or you will have higher cooling costs. Money lost either way. And one more thing about the risks. So we have other risks, and one of them is stormwater. And many of the things that work well for managing thermal well-being also correlate with reducing stormwater risk, because soil also releases water and absorbs water, and also partly releases and stores heat.
Yeah, so this is the sponge city concept, because all the cities are experiencing these problems, this heavy rainfalls, and this is going to increase with climate change. So this sudden events of dramatic rainfalls, we've seen it in Austria, we've seen it everywhere. So where you have to get rid of water, but your channel system is not able to do that. So this is where the sponge city comes into play, because you will need water afterwards if there is a heat period. And normally you do have a heat period after such a rainstorm event. You are desperately in need of water, and it's a bad idea to use drinking water then to water your tree, because you have thrown away water just a week ago. So this sponge concept of unsealed soil and of water capture capacity removes two problems at the same time, so that you do not need to get rid of the water at this very moment, and you do have the water saved for the next upcoming heat period. So that's a win-win situation. It's not too difficult to manage.
Brilliant. Thank you both. Before we move to the live question and answer segment of today's show, we do have 3 key takeaways for all of you in the audience. And Michael, I would love for you to share these 3 takeaways in your own words, and maybe provide a bit more context or commentary, if you like, before we move on and talk to some of the members in the audience today and hear what questions they have for you.
Yeah, thank you for letting me gather this results of our talk today with Panu. So just turning at the first point, you can affect microclimate with design. So of course we do have climate change, and there is a lot of climate change on the global basis, and things are happening. But especially when we walk in a human-made environment, like an urban environment, built-up environment, or even a modified landscaping environment, you are able to affect the microclimate. Just as I showed you in this example from the Paris University, you can cool it down by 1 degree, 2 degrees, 3 degrees. So that's just the bottom down. So this is the positive effect you can affect. But you can also, if you take care not to make it worse, so if you make it worse, you can also heat up 1, 2, 3 degrees extra to your already existing climate change. So if you think of the worst solution and of the best solution, you do have 6 degrees, for example, just to give you a number, which you can influence the microclimate with your design, plus the wind, plus the shading. So there's really a lot of things to do, really a lot of options to improve climate, including the face of climate change. So also to maybe mitigate some effects of the climate change in your urban design. Then the second takeaway, so predict and optimize the microclimate early in your project. So this is really a recommendation, because if you've done it in the last stage, it's basically too late. So of course you can change everything in the end. It's done oftenly, but it's normally not a very economic way of handling your projects. So if you consider this from the very first steps of your project, it doesn't really cost you a lot. It's just a thought at the beginning, and it's maybe a very small simulation at the very beginning, which is also not very expensive, also not very time consuming, but just to have an idea, what are my options and what are the impacts of the options. And if you optimize step by step, you will end up in a very optimized design, even before you start thinking about materials, trees, and so on and so on. So it's there 80% of it's done in the very first stages, where it doesn't cost a fortune. And you will do it for windows, you will do it for construction stability in any case. And just like nobody will compose a bridge without testing that it would take the load, you should not make an urban project without testing for the microclimate and the impacts. So I think that's mandatory, or should be mandatory. Yeah, and the third one, this is basically just chaining to what we talked about in the last minutes. It's a key attraction factor for people, because people are the key factor. We're designing for people. We're not designing for architecture books, and we're not for scientific outcomes. We're designing for people. And you need to attract people, you need to hold people. People are going to be the most important aspect, and it's going to be more important in these days because more time is available. Time is being distributed more frequently, more openly to individuals due to home office and all this stuff. So there is really a lot of things people are thinking about. Where can they go? Where can they work? Where can they live? And it's also starting for urban areas or for cities to be a competition between cities, because if you attract healthy people. If you attract wealthy people, they will generate tax incomes, they will generate living urban areas. And I think there is really a lot to do if I think it's a worldwide phenomenon, so that all these city center districts are going to be a bit more deserted, shops are closing down, and we all have the question in mind, what can we do with our CBDs to make them bring back life to them? And microclimate is really one of the key factors we have to consider if we want to bring life back to areas not having life at the moment for various reasons. So this would be my ideas about this really broad topic.
Thank you so much, Michael. We have our live Q&A coming up, but before we take all of your audience questions, I would love to give you the opportunity to receive a free custom consultation to learn more about ENVImet. If ENVImet sounds like a solution for your needs, if you're an urban planner, a developer, an architect, we have a business team of experts who would love to provide a tailored consultation to show you how ENVImet software might work for you in action. So if you're live streaming today's event, you will see a poll popping up on your screen asking if you want our business team to contact you to schedule a free custom consultation about ENVImet software. If you would like this consultation, just click yes to the poll, and be assured that we have a team of experts with engineering and scientific education, and you can really have intelligent and productive conversations with our business team to learn more about making urban environments healthier, more livable now and in the future. So let's please proceed and start taking some questions from the audience. Thank you all for your questions. I'm very excited to see what our first question is from Alessandro. Is there a way to calculate latent heat, so nighttime heat release, in ENVImet? Michael.
I guess that one goes to me, yeah. So latent heat, you mean of the transformation of liquid water to vapor, and the cooling effect. Yes, this is the way ENVImet is designed. It's not a steady state, so it calculates a complete day. So it knows what happens during the day. And you can also include rainfall, and it has a soil model, so it knows how the water is stored in the soil, how it is sickering due to gravity or being uptaken by the plant roots. So at any time, you do have the information about the soil water content, the availability of liquid water, and of course the energy balance of the surface, so that you know what happens during the night. Can we release heat, latent heat? Is there enough vapor deficit in the air? So that means is the air saturated already or not? So for every point in your model, you can just check and make the graphs, what happens during the nighttime, what happens during the day, or what happened if I put just an asphalt cover over this part of the road, and to see what are the effects.
Next up is from Mahesh. Can we model river bodies into the ENVImet software? That's a great question. And Michael, this is all you.
I see. Yes, we do have water in the ENVImet model in different ways. So we have water spraying from fountains, we have water in not moving water bodies, and we also have rivers in ENVImet. So the main difference between a pool, a pond, and a river is that the pond has its own water temperature because it's cooling down or heating up during the day, while a river is a river and it comes in with a water temperature, and it basically doesn't change much of the water temperature. So if you have been jumping into a river in the Alps, you know this water is always freezing cold, doesn't matter how hot it is outside. So you can use the water body in ENVImet and just say, okay, I keep the water temperature constant at, I don't know, 8 degrees or something like that, and then see the effect on humidity, on reflectivity, on air temperature exchange, and so on and so on.
So maybe put it another way, there's not really a lot that you cannot model with ENVImet. I mean, I can't think of anything material.
Yeah, you can even make a waterfall with water spray.
Next up from Amjad. What spatial scale is best for ENVImet? Can it analyze citywide data or is it more suitable for neighborhoods? And what's the optimal scale for performance?
That's me again, I guess. Yeah, it can do a citywide data because it's a physical model, so you can make really big models. But the question is, does it make sense? Because normally, if you're working on a project, on an infrastructure project, on an architectural project, you're not dealing with the whole complete city. So something which is 30 kilometers away from you does not affect your site. So normally you use a site specific orientation. So that means you're looking in a resolution of 1 meter, 2 meter, or 3 meter. Depends also on your demands. So how concrete is it? So if you're just in the very first design phase, you will probably just use very big blocks just to get an idea. If you're in a later phase of a project, you will think about facade greening, rooftop greening, trees, and then you say, okay, I will need a 1 meter resolution because I want this tree exactly in the model where I'm planning to be it in the reality. So the optimal scale is somewhere between 1 meter and 3 meters. And normally you can make it as big as you want, but I think most of people stop at 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers because that's really their area of problem. So it doesn't really make sense to use a lot of computer resources to deal with an area which has no relevance to your planning project right now.
Maybe another thing just to add on the performance. So performance as such, it matters, but like the most important thing is that it doesn't too much matter if you spend a bit more time designing a whole city district which will have 20,000 inhabitants. Like if you spend more time like designing it, because it's going to be built over 20 years, right? If you do a single building, of course, then you are in a smaller scale and the simulation and everything will be way faster and your options are also more reduced.
Thank you for these wonderful questions, everyone out there. This is actually a very stimulating conversation. And I've just heard from our backend that we have a lot of questions. So ENVImet is of great interest to all of you. So the next question is from Javad. I would like to ask about the use of advanced materials like phase change materials, PCM, and ENVImet. Is it possible to incorporate such materials into the ENVImet model and run simulations?
Yeah, technically, yes, because it's a physical simulation. The only point is that all these advanced materials, they are very, very different depending on the manufacturer, depending on what exactly is the construction. So there is no preset for that. So there are basically two options. So the one option would be to simulate the effects using some inbuilt materials. Or the other option would be really to say, I'm a big manufacturer of this material and I really want to have the behavior of my material be included in ENVImet. So that's technically possible. But as phase change materials are not so common right now, it's not yet included in the model. But that doesn't mean that it's not included in later versions.
Yeah, one thing to add, just like the manufactured phase change materials, they are really expensive. They don't work economically at the city scale, but there's one very cheap phase change material. It's called water. I mean, you need a lot of stuff for making an effect at the city level.
Forbes. Interesting. So does the climate resilience design requirements incorporate disability requirements?
I haven't heard of this kind of thing, but obviously the people who have difficulty to move are more exposed because they cannot choose where they are as easily. So I'm not aware of any climate resilience targeting a group of people other than based on age, which is a more common proxy for vulnerability than disability. Because you can be able-bodied, but just moving in a wheelchair or other similar thing, which doesn't particularly expose you to heat, for example.
Yes, I guess that is something where when we talked about investors or designers, where they could come into front to say, okay, I design a setting, an urban a set of buildings or a cluster of buildings, and I want to make sure that I incorporate people disabled people are able to use this open space. So this does not include to building ramps, which I'm obliged to do, but also maybe to look for shaded places or to think about, is there an inclination in the terrain, which metabolic rate, which this effect if I push my weeds there. So I think probably this will not be on a legislative level, but this could be an outstanding level for designers in competitions and make their design different to other designs.
Yeah, differentiation again comes into play. The next question is from Cheyenne. Can ENVImet simulate building impacts on urban areas? Previously, it only modeled 3-layer envelopes without heat output from buildings. Are there plans to enhance this and opportunities for collaboration?
Yeah, well, so we do have a 3-layer envelope. That's true. So this is why we decided to do that, because we have the plaster, we have the stone or the concrete and the indoor plaster. So we use the 3-layer approach. But of course, you can have more layers, but then you have just to make an average of the physical properties of one or two larger layers. And the other thing, I think you're probably referring to heat air conditioning units placed on the building and blowing away the hot air. I assume that this is a question because the
heat pumps
on the facade is included. Yes, there are definitely plans to include that, but it needs a lot of infrastructure because we have very detailed information about the building cooling plan, how this HVAC works, and so on and so on. It's not just placing a source of heat. You have to control this heat source in a reliable way. So physically, not difficult. Technically, a lot of information need to be inputted. Yeah, but definitely this is something we are looking at.
Great. And we have time for one final question from the audience. And this is from Alexander. Do you use Energy Plus as a basis for the calculation? If not, which standards do you use?
Whereas the other way around, Energy Plus uses the ENVImet output for calculations. So we are looking at the building volume on a very, say, generalized way. So it's a building volume which has an air volume in it, and we also have some levels. But in the end, we just look what's going on as heat or as direct radiation into the building, and then sum that up to the air temperature inside the building. We are not looking into the buildings, but what you can do is, yeah.
So what I think the question here is, so Energy Plus is a simulation engine. ENVImet is a simulation engine. ENVImet is based directly on physics, on physical interactions. So it's not using another calculation engine. That's, I think, the question's sense.
Yeah, or we can think of a two-way coupling so that you go into the building, the outdoor to the building, then look at what the building happens, and then back to the outdoor environment. But that's really complex. So normally the coupling goes from the large to the small. So that means the ENVImet localized weather information are used as an input value in Energy Plus. And it's also included in the software. You can just say this building needs the Energy Plus input, and then you get it as a text file and go to Energy Plus, and then you see, oh, there's the floor, there's the elevator, there are the doors, the buildings, the windows, and all this little stuff. Because that's very fine in Energy Plus now.
Hey, everyone out there, thank you for your questions. I think we had a very high volume of questions actually in today's talk. So it's obvious this is a very exciting and maybe new space for some of you dialing in today. I just wanted to let you know that we're so happy to have had you, Michael and Panu. Thank you for the time and the insights and the intelligence that you've brought to bear on today's conversation. And hey, all of us at One Click LCA are always happy to hear from you. You can contact us at oneclicklca.com. I also invite you to connect with us on LinkedIn. We have a very active community on LinkedIn. I think of 43,000 now. And we also have a new YouTube channel where you can access educational videos and tutorials about making the industry and urban environments more sustainable and livable. And that's all for now. And Panu and Michael, maybe give a final farewell, and we'll say goodbye.
Yeah, so thank you very much for inviting me to this thrilling talk, and really look forward to the new ideas coming together when we made it on a very sophisticated approach together with One Click LCA. I think there are so many questions that can be addressed from so many perspectives, and I think we will find a good way to find the answers to these many questions. And sometimes we need to find the question to some of the answers we find.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Abigail.